My name is Rebecca Calloway. I am 34 years old. Last Saturday, my mother-in-law placed a white legal envelope at the center of the dining table, looked my husband dead in the eye and said, "There is something here you deserve to know." She had secretly run a DNA test on our 4-year-old son. She assumed the results would shatter my marriage. What she did not anticipate was that those very results would shatter her. But here is the thing none of them understood. Not my husband, not his brother, not even his father. I had discovered the test 3 weeks before that Saturday. And what I did in those 3 weeks changed absolutely everything. Before I take you back to the beginning, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I genuinely love reading those. Now let me take you back 8 years to the afternoon I first met Sandra Calloway. I was 26. Nathan and I had been together for 5 months. He brought me to his family home on a Sunday in September, and his mother answered the door like she was presiding over a formal hearing. No embrace. A handshake. Strong grip, eyes already assessing. The first hour was manageable. Chicken casserole, light conversation. Gerald recounting a story about repainting their fence. Normal enough. But then Sandra redirected the conversation the way she redirected everything. Quietly, with intention. "So Rebecca, where did you grow up?" I told her. "Rockford, a small apartment. My mom was an emergency room nurse. And your father?" I placed my fork down. "He was gone by the time I turned 7. Sandra nodded slowly. She reached for her gold bracelet, a small rehearsed gesture I would witness hundreds of times across the next 8 years. She slid it up and down her wrist once, then offered a smile. "That must have shaped you," she said. The way someone says revealing when they mean noted. Later in the car, Nathan said, "She really liked you." I said, "Are you sure?" He laughed. I did not. What I observed that evening, and what I stored away without fully grasping it yet, was how urgently Sandra needed to trace where things originated. Not just me, everything. She asked Nathan about the bread, who had baked it, where the recipe came from. She examined the bottle before she poured the wine. She was someone who tracked lineages. I did not understand then that this need would one day be weaponized against my child, but I remember thinking, this is a woman who keeps a ledger. Nathan and I married the following August. Simple ceremony, 50 guests. A lakeside venue in northern Wisconsin. My mother drove up from Arizona. Sandra wore pale ivory, which my maid of honor called strategic. I did not dwell on it. I was marrying a good man. The first year was quiet the way new marriages tend to be. We rented a house in Kenosha, 35 minutes from Sandra and Gerald. Close enough for holidays. Far enough for air. Except Sandra did not believe in breathing room. She arrived without warning. Wednesdays mostly, sometimes Fridays, she would walk in through the back entrance. We had given her a key for genuine emergencies, and she would rearrange whatever was within reach. The pantry, the coat closet. Once she reorganized the linen shelf and left a sticky note. Sheets by size, easier to locate. I thanked her. Nathan said that was just how she was. Derek, Nathan's older brother, stopped by on weekends. He was 30 at the time, recently moved back near his parents, still rotating in Sandra's orbit like a satellite waiting for a signal. Every visit ended the same. Derek would leave and within hours, Sandra would call Nathan with observations about our home, our routines, our choices. I said nothing. I was still learning how this family operated. One evening at Christmas, Sandra lifted her glass. To Nathan, she said. She swept the table with her gaze. Gerald, Derek, Aunt Carol, Uncle Phil. Then her eyes landed on me for a fraction of a second. Nathan could have built a life anywhere. Anywhere. The table laughed. I smiled. Somewhere underneath my ribs, a small precise instrument made its first mark. Owen was born on a Thursday in February, 3 years into our marriage. 7 pounds 9 ounces. He arrived loud, which the midwife said was a wonderful sign. His hair was dark, nearly black. Sandra held him in the hospital room and said, "He looks exactly like Nathan at that age." There was warmth in it. Genuine warmth. For a moment I thought, perhaps this child is the thing that brings us together. That moment lasted roughly 7 months. At 7 months, Owen's hair began to shift. Not overnight. Gradually the way seasons move. Near black softened to chestnut. Chestnut warmed to copper. And by his first birthday, my son had a crown of bright auburn waves that caught sunlight like lit embers. I thought it was striking. My grandmother on my mother's side had the same coloring. So had her sister before her. The genetics were no mystery to me. But Sandra did not read it as genetics. She read it as a question. Interesting, she said at Owen's birthday gathering, holding a curl lightly the way someone holds something they intend to examine further. Auburn hair. She glanced at Nathan, then at me, then back at Nathan. Where does that come from in the family? I explained. Recessive gene, my maternal line. It surfaces in some generations and skips others. Sandra gave me the bracelet smile. Interesting, because that coloring does not appear anywhere in the Callaway line. She said it casually. The way you mention a hairline crack in a load-bearing wall. Not panicking, just observing, just noting something worth investigating. No one at the party responded. But I heard it, and with the certainty of someone trained to read behavioral cues professionally, I understood she had been circling this for some time. Over the following year, things slowly changed. Not dramatically. Nothing Sandra did was ever dramatic in its early stages. She was methodical. She laid groundwork the way someone lays down road salt before a freeze. Thin, deliberate layers you do not register until you are already sliding. Comments about Owen's hair became a recurring theme. Not every visit, but frequent enough. He is so distinctive looking. No one on our side carries that tone. Does your family have any Celtic ancestry? Maybe that would explain it. I began keeping track. 16 remarks in 7 months. I recorded the dates in a small spiral notebook I kept in my nightstand. Occupational habit. In my role as a speech-language pathologist, I documented everything. Communication patterns, behavioral markers, response triggers. Documentation was how I organized what I observed. Derek amplified the narrative through his own channels. He posted a photo of Owen at a park on Facebook. Bright curls, green jacket, running across the grass. Caption. He is something else. Wonder who he got that from. Laughing emoji. 40-something reactions. I showed Nathan. He said Derek was just being Derek. Family members began to look at me differently. Gerald's sister, Pam, avoided prolonged eye contact at a cookout. Diane, Nathan's cousin, who had always been friendly, stopped reaching out. Uncle Phil, Sandra's brother, started watching me across rooms with the patience of someone waiting to confirm a suspicion. None of this was ever spoken aloud. That was the design. Sandra was not constructing an accusation with language. She was constructing one with atmosphere. The kind of atmosphere that fills a space with doubt the way smoke fills a room before anyone locates the source. I felt it happening. I simply could not document it yet. The incident with Owen's backpack happened on a Thursday in March. Nathan had a client meeting 3 hours away. I had a morning full of sessions at the clinic. A 5-year-old with a late-onset stutter needed extra time, and I was not going to cut it short. Sandra offered to watch Owen. I dropped him off at 8 in the morning, packed his bag, snacks, his change of clothes, his dinosaur water bottle he had been attached to since he was 2. When I picked him up at 5:30, the bottle was nowhere. Oh, that old thing, Sandra said. It was looking worn, so I tossed it. It was not worn. I had purchased it 6 weeks prior. I did not push back. I thanked her, loaded Owen into the car, and drove home. But something else had caught my attention that afternoon. When I walked through Sandra's kitchen to retrieve Owen's jacket from the counter, I noticed a small resealable plastic bag on the table. The kind used for snacks or for samples. Sandra moved quickly. She scooped it up and tucked it into a kitchen drawer before I could read what was labeled on it. Just sorting things, she said. And on the desk in the side hallway, partially hidden behind a stack of mail catalogs, was a manila envelope. Thick sealed. The return address was not visible from where I stood. I did not connect the pieces that evening. The bottle, the bag, the envelope. They were fragments without a frame. I went home, gave Owen his bath, read him 2 chapters of his dinosaur book, and fell asleep. But the part of my brain trained to detect patterns in children who cannot explain what is wrong was already assembling the image. At work, I operated differently. Not as someone else, but as a more complete version of myself. In Sandra's world, I was measured, careful, perpetually adjusting. At the clinic, I was calm because I chose calm. There is a distinction. My caseload that spring included a 5-year-old named Marcus, who was born with a cleft palate that had been surgically repaired but left his articulation fragmented and hard to parse. His parents drove 45 minutes each way twice a week and waited in the parking lot. Getting him to produce clear bilabial sounds was work measured in patience and persistence. Some sessions he frustrated easily. Others he concentrated so fiercely his whole face went still. One Tuesday he said his own name clearly for the first time. His mother, who had been watching through the window, pressed both hands over her mouth. I wrote the date in the file and sat in my car for 10 minutes before I trusted myself to drive. My supervisor, Dr. Kim, said once, "You have the kind of steadiness in a crisis that most people spend careers trying to find." I made $68,000 that year. Enough to cover my student loans, contribute to Owen's savings account, and occasionally take Nathan out to dinner without checking the balance first. I mention this because later, when Sandra tried to suggest I had attached myself to Nathan for financial stability, it mattered that I had built my own foundation before he entered the picture. I worked through my graduate program, earned my license. I chose this profession because watching a child find their voice, literally locate the sounds that connect them to the world around them, is the closest thing I know to witnessing something sacred. Sandra never asked about my work. Not once in 8 years. Easter Sunday was when Sandra said it in front of everyone. We were gathered at her house. Full table. Gerald, Derek, Carol, Phil, and Diane. Owen had just run into the dining room in his yellow knit sweater, auburn curls bouncing, and Diane said, "He is just the most adorable thing." Sandra set her glass down without hurry. "He genuinely does not resemble any Calloway I have come across." She let the silence settle in. Then Derek, absolutely on cue. "Mom is right. I looked through the old albums. Not a single person with that color." I felt the table shift. Not explosively. No one reacted visibly, but the mood changed the way pressure changes before weather arrives. Gerald cleared his throat. Carol became very interested in her plate. I looked at Nathan. He was studying the tablecloth. He said nothing. Dinner resumed. Owen ate his mashed carrots. Sandra served dessert. Derek praised the cake. The wound was opened and papered over in the same motion. In the car on the drive home I said, "If your mother says that again in front of your family, I will address it myself." Nathan's grip tightened on the wheel. "She will not. I will speak to her." "When?" "Soon. That is the same thing you said after Christmas." He did not answer. We completed the drive in silence. Owen slept in the back seat, his auburn curls pressed against the headrest. He never spoke to her. I knew before we pulled into the driveway that he would not. Nathan avoided confrontation the way some people avoid expressways. Not from cowardice, but because he had spent his entire life learning that the path of least resistance was the one that cost the least. But I was finished waiting for him to choose the harder route. 2 weeks after Easter, my phone rang during a break between sessions. I was in the staff room going through session notes. Unknown local number. I nearly let it go to voicemail. "Ms. Calloway? This is Andrea from Meridian Genomics. I am reaching out to confirm receipt of a sample submitted under your son's name, Owen Calloway, age 4. I set my pen down. I did not submit any sample. The submission was filed under the name Sandra Calloway, identified as the paternal grandmother. However, our protocol requires written consent from a parent or legal guardian for any testing involving a minor. Please hold." I asked her to repeat the entire statement. She did. "The sample has been flagged pending your authorization. Would you like us to proceed or cancel?" "Cancel." My hands were unsteady when I ended the call, but my voice had not shifted once. Something my mother had modeled for 30 years, delivering difficult news to families in the ER. She never raised her voice when it mattered most. I sat at the small table in the staff room for 6 minutes. I stared at the health compliance poster on the wall and used it to anchor myself. Then I picked up my phone and called a family attorney. I need to stop here because what I did in the 21 days between that phone call and that Saturday gathering is precisely why things ended the way they did. If this is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button. I promise it is worth staying. I reached out to an attorney that same afternoon. Her name was Priya, and she told me something that reframed everything I thought I understood about my situation. Priya bought practice family law out of a firm in Madison. She had 17 years of experience and a reputation for being precise and direct. I relayed everything. The comments, the backpack, the water bottle, the call from Meridian Genomics. She listened without a single interruption, which told me she understood the weight of what she was hearing. When I finished, she leaned forward. Under Wisconsin law, a grandparent has no authority to authorize genetic testing on a minor child without express consent from a parent or legal guardian. Period. So what she did is illegal. It constitutes a violation of your son's privacy rights and is potentially actionable under civil statute. It may also expose the testing company to liability, depending on what she submitted in the authorization form. She paused. Do you know whether she forged your consent? I do not. We will find out. Priya made a note. In the meantime, do not confront her. Do not tell your husband yet. I looked at her. Why not? Because if you tell Nathan, he will call Sandra. She will cry, apologize, and ask him to handle it privately within the family. Nothing will actually change. If you want to stop this pattern permanently, you need to let her play out her hand. I paid the consultation fee. $300. It was the most effective money I have spent in my adult life. On the drive to the daycare pickup, I called Meridian Genomics and confirmed the sample had been canceled. I asked them to flag any future submissions involving Owen Callaway requiring my written authorization before processing. Then I went inside and Owen ran at me full speed, arms out, curls wild. I caught him and thought, no one takes anything from us. That night after Owen fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I searched DNA testing minor consent laws in Wisconsin. The results confirmed everything Priya had told me. No grandparent had standing to authorize this. I searched consumer DNA platforms next. This was where the picture got more complicated. Clinical laboratories like Meridian had strict verification protocols. That is why they called me. But consumer-facing ancestry platforms had consent flows that were more of a checkbox situation. I am the parent or guardian. Click. Submit. Done. Had Sandra also submitted through a consumer platform alongside the clinical test? I opened Sandra's Facebook profile. She posted rarely, but Derek tagged her in things. Family dinners, Owen's photos, holiday gatherings. I scrolled back 2 months. In January, Derek had shared a link to an article titled, "What can your DNA tell you that your family never did? Surprising results from at-home ancestry kits." Sandra had commented underneath, "Fascinating." I screenshotted it, saved it in a folder I labeled documentation. Professional habit. Then I opened my nightstand notebook, the one with 16 dated entries of Sandra's comments about Owen's hair. I added entry 17. March 11th. Meridian Genomics confirmed unauthorized sample, submitted under Sandra Callaway's name without parental consent. I closed the notebook. I looked at the bedroom door. Nathan was already asleep. I wanted to go in and shake him awake and lay every piece of this in front of him. But Priya's instruction kept returning. Let her play her hand. So I turned off the kitchen light and I waited. The most difficult part was not the waiting. It was carrying the knowledge completely alone. For the next 4 days, I moved through my life as though nothing had shifted. Work sessions, home dinner, Owen's bath, the dinosaur book, 2 chapters every night, same routine. Nathan noticed nothing, and I hold no resentment about that. He was deep in a project deadline at the architecture firm. He came home hollowed out. He kissed Owen on the top of his head. He kissed me on the cheek. He fell asleep before 10. One night Owen padded down the hall at 2 in the morning and climbed into our bed, the way he always did, wedging himself between us with the confidence of someone who had never questioned where he belonged. He curled against Nathan's side, his auburn curls spread across the pillow between them. I watched them in the dark. My husband's profile, my son's small fist wrapped around Nathan's sleeve. I thought about my mother. She raised 2 children in a rental unit after my father left, on a nurse's salary, no backup plan, no inheritance. She made it work through sheer documentation. Bills, schedules, timelines scratched on the backs of envelopes. She taught me that information by itself is not leverage. Knowing when and how to use it is. At the clinic, I worked with a 6-year-old girl who had been selectively mute since starting kindergarten. Getting her to produce intentional sound in a clinical setting was months of quiet, deliberate work. Favored objects, low-demand tasks, modeling without pressure. One Wednesday afternoon she said water to me. One syllable. She immediately covered her mouth with both hands like she had surprised herself. I wrote it in her chart and smiled like it was routine. Some things cannot be forced. You create conditions. You wait. You hold the space steady until the moment arrives. I was not ready yet, but I was getting close. On day 6, I had an unexpected opportunity. I drove to Sandra's house to collect Owen's spare shoes that had been left there the previous weekend. Sandra was at a hair appointment. Derek answered the door. He was on a video call in the living room, laptop balanced on the coffee table, talking loudly enough for the neighborhood. I walked through toward the mudroom. Derek's voice carried the way it always had, louder than necessary, as if volume were proof of significance. Mom has everything ready. She is doing it at dinner on Saturday in front of everyone. My hand stopped on Owen's left shoe. She has had this plan for 2 weeks. Once Nathan sees the documentation, he will not be able to look the other way. The voice on the screen said something I could not make out. Derek laughed. It is going to be something, I am telling you. I picked up the shoes, walked back through. Derek saw me, ended the call fast. Oh hey, just catching up with someone. I smiled. No problem, just grabbing Owen's shoes. Cool. Tell Nathan I said hi. I will. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, placed both shoes on the passenger seat, put both hands on the steering wheel, and pressed until my knuckles went pale. Now I had 3 confirmed facts. When Saturday? Where the dinner table? Who would be present? Everyone. Sandra had arranged the stage. She had seated the audience. She had rehearsed her delivery. And she was completely certain with absolute conviction that the results would say exactly what she needed them to say. I started the car. I was not going to prevent her from striking the match. I was going to let it burn back to her. On day 9, I found something I had not anticipated. I had been trying to understand which consumer platform Sandra might have used alongside the clinical test. I created my own account on the most widely used ancestry service and submitted a sample of my own, then spent 2 evenings reading through how their familial matching algorithms worked. When you submit DNA, the platform does not simply run one targeted comparison. It cross-references your profile against every other profile in the database, flagging anyone who shares enough markers to qualify as a possible relative, second cousins, half-siblings. And if Sandra had submitted Owen's DNA, that meant Owen's profile had been indexed against the entire network. I logged into the account Sandra had created. I located it through a password reset option that Derek had once casually mentioned. The password was Owen's birthday. Of course it was. And there, under potential relatives on Owen's profile, was a name I had never encountered. Thomas W. Age 41. Seattle, Washington. Relationship estimate. Half-uncle or close equivalent. I stared at the screen for a full minute. A half-uncle indicated that Thomas shared one biological parent with either Nathan or with me. Since I was not biologically connected to the platform's data, only Owen was, the connection had to trace through Nathan's side, which meant either Gerald had a son he had never disclosed or Sandra did. I saved a screenshot, added it to the documentation folder, emailed it to Priya. The next morning Priya called. If this match holds, someone in the Callaway biological line has an undisclosed connection to this individual. Or Sandra herself does, I said. She submitted the sample. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then we need to find out who Thomas W. actually is. Thomas William Hargrove. Born April 1985. Portland, Oregon. Place for private adoption at birth through a Catholic Family Services organization in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It took me 3 evenings to piece this together. The platform's public profile was limited, but Thomas had enabled open contact. His profile note read, adopted at birth, searching for biological family, genuinely open to connecting. I did not reach out to him. That was not mine to do. But I ran the numbers. Born 1985. Sandra was 23. She and Gerald married in 1988, when she was 26. Nathan was born in 1989. Sandra had a child 3 years before she married Gerald. A child she gave up, a child she never told anyone about. Almost no one. Because when I examined the match report more carefully, I noticed a section I had initially overlooked. The platform listed shared connections, other profiles that both Thomas and Owen matched in the database. One of them was listed as Carol H., relationship estimate, possible aunt or half-aunt. Carol's last name before she married was Holden, and her middle name, the one nobody used, was her grandmother's name, Hannah. I checked her social media profile. Carol and Holden. Carol knew. She had known for nearly 4 decades. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about Sandra at 23. Unmarried, probably terrified. Making a decision that would follow her quietly for the rest of her life. I have worked with enough families to understand that kind of fear. The weight of impossible choices. I knew that version of her. But understanding a choice someone made in a desperate moment is different from forgiving the architecture of deception they built around it for 40 years. Sandra had not simply surrendered a child she was not prepared to raise. She had buried the truth so thoroughly that by the time she felt threatened by me, she had convinced herself the only real danger to her family was my son's hair color. She pointed her buried fear outward and aimed it at a 4-year-old boy. Thursday, Sandra called. Big family dinner Saturday. I want everyone together. Tell Carol and Phil to come. Her voice had a particular brightness to it, the brightness of a person who has been rehearsing. We will be there, I said. Friday, I printed every screenshot. I organized the documentation folder chronologically. Dates, incidents, evidence, lab confirmation, account login records, the familial match report for Thomas W. I backed everything up to cloud storage and emailed copies to Priya. Priya said, if she presents the test results publicly at that table, you have witnesses. Your civil case becomes substantially stronger. I know. Are you certain you want to let it happen? You could address this privately before Saturday. End it quietly. I am certain. Saturday evening, I gave Owen his bath. He sat in the tub making waves with his palms, his auburn curls slick and dark against the sides of his face. I shampooed his hair slowly, working through the tangles. Mommy, why does Grandma Sandy always touch my hair? My hands paused. Because your hair is beautiful, sweetheart. Is it special hair? I smiled. The most special. I dried him off, dressed him in his pajamas, read 2 chapters of the dinosaur book. He fell asleep holding 2 of my fingers in his fist. Nathan came in from the hallway. Mom seems really wound up about tomorrow. You have any idea what it is? I looked at him. My husband. Kind eyes, tired face. A good man who had lived his entire life trusting that the ground beneath his family was solid. I guess we will find out, I said. I did not sleep that night. I ran through every version of Saturday I could envision. In every version, the truth surfaced. The only variable was the cost. Sunday morning, I dressed simply. Cream blouse, dark trousers, small gold earrings Nathan had given me on our 2nd anniversary. Nothing combative. Just me, clearly myself. Owen wore a navy striped shirt and his brown boots. He spun twice in front of the hallway mirror before I caught him. Nathan loaded the car. 35 minutes north. Classic rock on the radio. Owen fell asleep before the interstate. I watched Nathan's hands on the steering wheel. Steady hands. He designed structures for a living. Load-bearing walls, support columns. Things engineered to hold. And I thought, today those hands will either reach for mine or pull away. We arrived at Sandra's at 4 o'clock. 2 cars in the driveway. Derek's truck, Carol's wagon. Gerald met us at the door. Sandra appeared behind him, pulling Nathan into a long, tight embrace. The kind she reserved for moments she considered meaningful. She acknowledged me with a brief nod. Take Owen up to the guest room, she said. He can rest on the bed. I carried Owen upstairs, laid him down, pulled the quilt up over his legs. His auburn curls spread across the white pillowcase. Back downstairs, the household was assembled. Gerald in his chair near the window. Carol on the love seat. Phil beside her, arms crossed. Derek on the far end of the sofa, one knee bouncing steadily. Diane at the sideboard, quietly straightening napkins. And on the hall table, exactly where I had spotted it 3 weeks earlier, the white legal envelope. Thick sealed, waiting. Sandra caught me looking at it. She smiled. Dinner first, she said. The chicken was genuinely excellent. I will give Sandra that. Her cooking had never been a performance. Warren told a fishing story. Phil laughed in his big open way. Diane complimented the roasted vegetables. Normal sounds, normal surface. But underneath I was watching the currents. Derek checked the time on his phone every few minutes. Not messaging anyone. Just checking. He had a clock in his head. Carol ate almost nothing. She held her fork the way you hold a railing in uncertain weather. Tight grip, eyes fixed ahead. Sandra presided at the head of the table, refilling Gerald's water glass, asking Phil about his truck, laughing at the right moments. She was performing composure the way an experienced performer delivers grief. Technically precise. Internally hollow. 25 minutes in, the side conversation had ebbed. Gerald was mid-sentence about a repair he had made to the deck railing. Sandra rose from her chair. She smoothed her cardigan, cleared her throat quietly. Before we get to dessert, she said, I would like to share something with the people in this room. The table went still. Gerald stopped speaking. Phil set his fork down. Diane looked toward Derek. Derek looked at his plate. Carol shut her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for me to register it. Sandra walked to the hallway, returned carrying the white legal envelope. She held it at chest level, address side visible. The way you hold something you want people to understand is official. What happened in the next 4 minutes altered the course of more than just my own life. Everyone at that table would carry it. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. This is where everything shifts. Sandra set the envelope at the center of the table and slid it toward Nathan. Open this. Nathan looked at the envelope, then at his mother. What is this, Mom? Sandra placed her palms flat on the table. She had rehearsed this part. I could identify it from her breathing pattern alone. Measured, deliberate. The cadence of someone managing a performance. This is a DNA test, she said. For Owen. The room contracted. Gerald sat forward. Sandra, what on earth did you do? Sandra kept her gaze on me. No offense to anyone, she said. But this family deserves the truth. Nathan's voice lowered. What truth, Mom? I had this done privately because I love this family. And that child, she gestured toward the ceiling, toward the room where my son was sleeping, does not look like a Calloway. Derek shifted toward the table. Carol stared at her untouched plate. Sandra's voice climbed half a register. She was approaching the section she had prepared most carefully. I have said it before and I am saying it again today. That auburn hair does not run anywhere in this family. And I believe Nathan deserves to know whether that child is genuinely his. The sentence landed in the room and did not move. Phil looked at his hands. Diane's lips parted, then pressed closed. Gerald gripped the armrest of his chair. Nathan stared at the envelope, jaw working the way it does when he is holding something back that is large and heavy. Open it, Sandra said again. She was utterly certain of what those pages contained. She was wrong. Nathan picked up the envelope, broke the seal, withdrew a stack of printed sheets. Lab letterhead. He read the first page in silence. Nearly 20 seconds. Long enough for Sandra to shift her weight from her left foot to her right. Nathan looked up. He looked directly at Sandra. He is mine. Sandra blinked. What? Probability of paternity. 99.9997%. He held the page out toward the table. Owen is my son. The expression on Sandra's face did not fall. It fractured. Still assembled but no longer holding structure. That cannot be the right reading. Let me see those. She reached forward. Nathan drew the pages back. No. You have done what you came here to do. Let it stand. Derek leaned forward. Maybe there was a processing error. Nathan turned to him. Do not, Derek. Derek recoiled as if the floor had shifted. In 32 years, Nathan had never spoken to him that way. The table absorbed it. Something had changed in Nathan. Some door that had been propped open through his entire childhood had just closed. Sandra's hand moved to her gold bracelet, the one she slid up and down in every moment of pressure. In our first meeting at Christmas, at Easter, every time her certainty met friction, she worked it back and forth. There must be some error, she repeated. Her voice had lost its rehearsed shape. The hair, the coloring. It simply does not fit. Nathan set the pages on the table. He looked at me across the length of the room. He had not looked at me once since Sandra stood up. I had been sitting still, hands folded, watching. Now it was my turn. The results are accurate, Sandra. My voice did not change register. It was the same voice I use when a parent asks me whether their child will ever communicate the way other children do. Steady. carrying weight beneath the surface. I know this because I received a phone call from the laboratory 3 weeks ago. They contacted me to verify parental consent, which you never obtained. A second shift in the room. Different from the first. Deeper. Gerald stood halfway from his chair. You tested our grandson without asking his parents. Sandra's chin lifted. I was acting in the interest of this family. There is a Wisconsin statute, I said, that expressly prohibits a grandparent from authorizing genetic testing of a minor without written consent from a parent or legal guardian. My attorney has already reviewed the particulars. I delivered this the way I dictate clinical notes. Factual. Sequential. No drama, no decoration. Sandra's face moved through 3 expressions in quick succession. Her hand slipped from the bracelet. The laboratory should not have. The laboratory followed its protocol. You did not follow yours. Silence. Carol pressed her lips together. Phil turned to look at Gerald. Gerald looked at Sandra with an expression I had not seen him wear across 8 years. Not anger, not disappointment. Something quieter and more devastating. The look of someone who has just realized the map they trusted does not match the terrain. I let the silence expand. 1 full second. 2. 3. Then I said, but that is not the most significant thing in those pages. Every face in the room turned. Nathan looked at me. What do you mean? Turn to page 5, I said. He moved past the paternity confirmation, past the processing summary, past the consent disclosure notice. He reached the familial match section. He read aloud slowly the way someone reads a sentence in a language they almost know. Possible familial match. Thomas W. Age 41. Seattle, Washington. Relationship estimate. Half-uncle to Owen Calloway. He stopped. He read it again. Then he looked at the pages, looked at me, looked at Sandra. Half-uncle. He said it as though measuring each syllable. That would mean he shares a biological parent with either me or with Danielle. He is not connected to my side, I said. Nathan turned to Sandra. Mom, who is Thomas? Sandra's mouth opened. Her hands had moved to the edge of the table and were pressing there. Her bracelet hung perfectly still. I do not know what that. Carol's water glass clattered down. She stood up. Trish, do not do this. 2 words. The entire table understood. Phil looked at his wife. Gerald, who had been gripping his chair back, pushed himself upright. The legs of the chair scraped the hardwood floor. That sound cut through everything. Sandra. Answer Nathan. Sandra's eyes went to Carol. Carol shook her head once. A small desperate motion. It was before your father, Sandra said. Her voice had no shape left to it. Not the practiced crack of a woman performing remorse. A real fracture. The sound of something that has been held under pressure for 40 years finally giving way. Before us. Nathan's voice was flat, stripped of everything but the question. You had a child. I was so young. I was not prepared. You gave up a child and never said a word. He was standing now. Never told Dad. Gerald set both hands flat on the table. The hands of a man who had built and repaired things his whole life, and they were shaking. 40 years, Trish. You told Carol. He looked at Carol, who had both arms wrapped around herself near the china cabinet. But not me. Carol. Gerald. She was frightened. Were you frightened every day for 40 years, Trish? He asked it quietly. That question did not leave the room. It settled. Sandra cried. Not the kind of tears she deployed when Nathan missed a Sunday call, or when Derek canceled a visit. These were the tears of someone watching a structure she had built with silence for 4 decades buckle under the pressure of its own design. In one brief moment I saw her. Not the Sandra who had spent 8 years auditing my presence in her family, but the 23-year-old woman who sat in a hospital in Milwaukee and signed a form and walked out the door and carried that decision every single day. I understood her. I even felt something soften toward her in that moment. Then Sandra straightened, wiped her face and said, This is Rebecca's doing. She has engineered this to humiliate me in my own home. And the softness was gone. Nathan stepped toward her. Mom, Rebecca did not engineer anything. You ordered the test. You planned this dinner. You put that envelope on the table. He picked up the stack of pages and held them toward her. You wanted everyone to see the truth. He said the last phrase with perfect steadiness. Well, we have all seen something today. Sandra sat down. She missed the center of her chair and caught the edge. Carol moved to stabilize her. Sandra pushed her hand away. Derek was crying. Not neatly. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and looked at the wall. Mom, he said. You told me Owen was not Nathan's. You said you had evidence. You made me believe. Sandra said nothing. Nathan turned to him. And you amplified it. Derek. At every dinner. Online. To the family. Derek's face crumpled. I know. I am sorry. I did not question it. That is on me. And then Nathan did something I had not anticipated. He picked up his phone, scrolled to his photo library, and held the screen out toward the table. An old photograph. A young woman in a garden squinting in bright light. Shoulder-length red auburn hair. She looked to be about 20. I found this when I was clearing out the attic storage boxes 2 years ago, Nathan said. You told me it was one of Carol's old photos. The woman in the photograph was Sandra. Philip leaned in. Sandra, is that you? Your hair was auburn. Sandra's hand, the one that had reached for her bracelet all evening, came down slowly to her lap. I began coloring it when I was 19, she said. I always found it difficult to look at. The auburn hair that Sandra had insisted did not run in the Calloway family had been present in Sandra's own bloodline her entire life. She had covered it with salon appointments for 4 decades, and when her grandson was born carrying the same inheritance, she had not seen family resemblance. She had seen exposure. Derek looked at me. Danielle, I am truly sorry. I know it is inadequate. I know, Derek. I said it without bitterness. There was no more to add. Gerald picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. He put it on with the same deliberate care he applied to everything. I am going to drive. He did not direct the words at anyone in particular. He did not look at Sandra. Nathan, we are leaving. He turned to me. Get Owen. I went upstairs. Owen was still sleeping. Auburn curls across the white quilt like copper threads caught in light. I lifted him gently. He stirred, pressed his face against my collarbone, and went still again. I carried him down. The dining room was half emptied. Phil had his coat. Diane was near the front door, keys already out. Carol stood by the china cabinet, arms still wrapped around herself, motionless. At the front door, Sandra stepped in front of Nathan. Eyes swollen, her hair that maintained dark brown, suddenly looking like what it had always been. A careful construction. Nathan, please. Stay and talk to me. We can sort through this together. Nathan stopped. He looked at her for a long moment. You did not come here to talk, Mom. You came here to perform. He held up the pages one final time. You wanted everyone to witness the truth. His voice was quiet. So did I. Carol reached for Sandra's arm. People need a moment to breathe. Gerald, halfway out the door, said without turning back, Carol, if you say another word tonight, my first call tomorrow morning is to my attorney. Carol went silent. Phil moved past her. Diane followed without eye contact. I carried Owen to the car. Nathan held the door open. I settled Owen into his seat. He murmured something about his toy dinosaur. I found it in the side pocket of his bag and pressed it into his hands. He held it and drifted back. The house behind us, Sandra's house, the house she had controlled for 30 years, emptied by her own design. Every person she had seated at that table to witness her moment walked out. We drove without speaking for 15 minutes. Owen slept. The highway was quiet Sunday evening. Overpasses passed overhead in slow intervals, casting bands of amber across the dashboard. Nathan spoke first. How long did you know? 3 weeks about the test. About Thomas 11 days. Why didn't you tell me? I had rehearsed the shape of this answer before I found the words for it. Because I needed you to see it happen. If I had told you privately, you would have called her that same night. She would have cried, apologized, and asked you to keep it in the family. The cycle would have continued. He exhaled slowly. You are saying I would have let it go. I am saying the dynamic was decades old. A private conversation between you and me was not going to interrupt 40 years of established patterns. You needed to be in that room. He was quiet for 2 full minutes. Then softly, she dyed her hair for 40 years because she was ashamed of it. And she was going to use Owen's hair as a weapon. I know. Another stretch of road. I have a half-brother I did not know existed. He said it the way you say something you are placing carefully, finding where it belongs in your understanding of the world. 41 years old. In Seattle. He reached across the console and found my hand. He held it without speaking. He did not let go until we turned into our driveway. He turned off the engine, sat for a moment in the quiet. Thank you, he said, for not shielding me from this. I squeezed his hand. That is not what partners are for. Monday, Nathan called Sandra. I need time, Mom. Please do not contact Rebecca or Owen. Sandra, for how long? Nathan. Until I say otherwise. He ended the call, poured his morning coffee, and went to work. That was Nathan. He processed by doing. Tuesday, Gerald called. He was staying with his brother Ray. Told Sandra I need space, he said. His voice was even. No fracture in it. I spent 40 years with that woman, he said. I can work with a mistake she made when she was young. People make mistakes. I have made mine. But 40 years of choosing silence every single day. That is not a mistake. That is a decision renewed daily. Nathan did not respond. Some things a son can only receive, not answer. Wednesday, Derek sent me a message. Just a few lines. He should not have amplified what his mother told him without questioning it. He knew that now. He was sorry. Not asking for anything. Just saying it. I replied thank you. Thursday, Priya sent Sandra a formal notice. Cease and desist regarding all unauthorized genetic testing of Owen Callaway. Notice of pending civil action under Wisconsin privacy statutes. Sandra called Nathan, panicked. Nathan told her to read it carefully and consult an attorney. Friday evening, Nathan sat at the desk in the study, laptop open. A search window on the screen. I found him, he said. Thomas. He is a high school history teacher. Coaches debate club. He looked up the school profile. He turned the screen toward me. A photo on a faculty page. Thomas Hargrove, 41. Dark hair, Nathan's jaw, the same slight angle to the brow. He posted on the platform 3 years ago, looking for his birth mother. On the kitchen counter behind us sat the white legal envelope, unsealed. The document meant to expose me had become the document that exposed a truth Sandra had carried and concealed for 40 years. Nathan drafted a message to Thomas on Saturday morning. He wrote it 4 times and deleted 3. I watched from the hallway without saying anything. He needed to find it himself. The version he sent was short. My name is Nathan Callaway. I believe I may be your half-brother. My mother was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1962. If you are willing to speak, I would welcome that. Thomas replied within 90 minutes. I have been looking for my birth mother for 7 years. I never thought I would hear from a brother. They arranged a video call for that Saturday evening. Nathan set up his laptop at the kitchen table. I took Owen to the living room for his dinosaur show. At 7 p.m. I heard Nathan say, "Hi. I am Nathan." And then a voice I did not recognize, deeper and steadier than Nathan's. "Hi, Nathan. I am Thomas. I stayed in the other room, but the house is not large." 20 minutes later, I heard Nathan cry. Not quietly. From somewhere central in his chest. The kind of sound that comes from a place most people spend years pretending is not there. I stood in the doorway. On the laptop screen, Thomas was crying too. The same jaw. The same slight crook at the bridge of the nose. 41 years apart. 2 people built from the same original blueprint. Thomas spoke. Does she know I exist? My birth mother. Nathan wiped his face. She knows. It did not go well. Thomas. I never wanted to cause harm. I just needed to understand where I came from. Nathan. You did not cause anything, Thomas. You were not the one who kept the secret. Lily tugged my sleeve. Mommy, why is Daddy sad? I lifted her. He is not sad. He is meeting someone he has been missing. 2 weeks later, Sandra arrived at our front door unannounced. The old pattern. Back entrance assumption. Except the back entrance code had been changed. She knocked at the front. I opened the door. She was wearing a gray cardigan, no makeup, eyes red at the edges. She looked 10 years older than the woman who had slid that envelope across the table with the composure of someone who believed she was restoring order. I need to explain myself, she said. I was young. My parents made the decision. I have carried the shame of it for decades. Nathan appeared behind me. Then you should have addressed it honestly at some point across 40 years. Instead you aimed it at Rebecca and Owen. Sandra looked at me. Rebecca? I'm asking you. Please. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had spent 8 years measuring and cataloging me. Who had taken my son's DNA without my consent. Who had arranged a public ambush and called it protection. Sandra, you are welcome to maintain a relationship with Owen. He loves you and we will not take that from him. Something shifted in her expression. But it will be on our terms and our schedule, and you will never be alone with him again. The shift dimmed. But she did not argue. For the first time in 8 years, Sandra Calloway said nothing in response. She stepped down from the porch, walked to her car and drove away. Gerald called Nathan on a Wednesday, for weeks after the dinner. I have been staying at Ray's since that night, he said. First time in my life I have slept under someone else's roof by choice. Nathan. Are you doing okay, Dad? Gerald. I have been seeing someone. A counselor. Do not read anything into that. Nathan, I'm not. Gerald. He says I need to figure out what I can carry and what I cannot. He paused. The line held a particular quiet. I can carry a decision she made at 23, he said. People get scared. They make choices they cannot take back. But I cannot carry 40 years of silence. That is not a mistake, Nathan. That is a sustained choice. Nathan did not answer. Sometimes the most honest thing a son can offer is the space to say the thing out loud. The following Sunday, Gerald drove to our house. He brought a wooden toy he had made in Ray's garage. A small articulated dinosaur, hand-sanded, painted green with hinged joints that actually moved. For Owen, he said at the door. Owen spotted him from the hallway and came running. Papa Gerald. Gerald scooped him up in both arms, and Owen pressed his face against the flannel collar of his shirt, auburn curls against the plaid pattern. Gerald held him for a long time. Then he looked at Nathan. He looks like your mother did when she was small before she decided to change it. Nathan. I know, Dad. Gerald set Owen down. Owen immediately began moving the dinosaur's legs along the porch railing, making low rumbling sounds. Gerald watched him with the expression of a man who has just had to rewire his understanding of 40 years of shared history, tracing every connection back to its source, finding the places where current had been redirected, deciding what could still hold. 6 months later, Nathan flew to Seattle and met Thomas in person. They sat in a diner for nearly 4 hours. Two men with the same jaw and the same slightly uneven brow. 41 years between them. Thomas brought his partner Jess and their daughter Maya. Nathan brought photos of Owen. In September, Thomas and his family came to Wisconsin. Maya and Owen ran through the backyard sprinklers while Nathan and Thomas sat on the porch with lemonades and talked. I stood at the kitchen window and watched them. Two brothers, introduced by an envelope that was never meant to bring them together. Sandra and Gerald attended couples counseling. Gerald moved back home after 6 weeks, but he set conditions. No more concealed information. No more sealed histories. No more locked drawers between them. Sandra agreed. She stopped maintaining the hair color. It grew in silver white, with traces of copper near the temples. The original shade, the one she had covered for 40 years. Ghosting back through. Carol was not invited to Thanksgiving. Nobody discussed the reason. The empty chair communicated everything. Derek sent a handwritten apology. 3 pages. He drove it over and left it in the mailbox. It was the most genuinely honest thing he had ever written. The relationship is being rebuilt slowly. The way you rebuild anything that was worth having, one honest exchange at a time. At the clinic, I worked with a 6-year-old boy who had been taking his first steps in new leg braces. He gripped my hands, pushed off, and stood for 4 seconds before sitting back down. His father turned away from the window and covered his face. I wrote in his file. Patient stood unsupported for seconds. Advancement within expected trajectory. Some things require time. But they come. The white legal envelope sits in the top drawer of my desk at home. I have not thrown it away. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me that sometimes the instrument someone shapes to destroy you is the very instrument that frees you. Here is what I understand now. The people who work hardest to expose what they perceive as your secret are almost always carrying the largest secret of their own. And the truth does not need a stage or an audience or a legal envelope slid across a dining table with rehearsed precision. It only needs time. That is my story. A DNA test, a dinner table, and a secret that had been sealed for 40 years. If this reminded you to trust what you know when everyone around you is trying to rewrite it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for staying. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time.